The Keth had ruled the galaxy for 300 years. Their empire stretched across 12,000 star systems, and no species had ever defeated them in battle. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms, and they believed themselves to be the most intelligent beings in existence. Every species they encountered was given 2 choices: surrender and serve, or die. Most chose to serve. Humanity was discovered 40 years ago when a Keth exploration vessel detected radio signals coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. The Keth arrived with a fleet of 500 warships and found a species that had not yet left its own star system. The humans had primitive spacecraft, basic weapons, and no understanding of faster-than-light travel. The Keth High Commander at the time found them amusing. There was no war. There was no negotiation. The Keth simply announced that Earth was now a protectorate world under their dominion. Humans would be allowed to live. They would be allowed to trade in limited ways. They would provide workers for mining operations on Mars and in the asteroid belt. In exchange, they would not be destroyed. Most of humanity accepted this reality because they had no other choice. Captain Jack Marson remembered the day the Keth arrived. He was 12 years old, standing in his backyard in Texas, watching the massive alien vessels block out the sun. His father had served in the old United States Navy, and he told young Jack that someday humanity would find a way to be free. Jack had believed him. Now Jack was 52 years old, with gray hair in his temples and deep lines around his eyes. He commanded an aging patrol vessel called Earth-7, one of the few human ships the Keth allowed to operate. His job was to monitor traffic in Earth's orbital space and report any unauthorized human activity to the Keth authorities. He hated every moment of it. His daughter Kate served as his executive officer. She was 28, sharp-minded, and carried the same quiet fire that burned in her father's chest. She had never known a world where humanity was free, but she had grown up listening to her grandfather's stories about the old days. She dreamed of something better, even though she could not imagine how it would ever come to pass. On the Keth capital world of Vithron, High Commander Zorath reviewed his morning intelligence reports in a chamber made of black stone. Zorath was old even by Keth standards, nearly 400 years, and he had personally overseen the subjugation of 17 species during his career. Humanity was barely worth his attention. A junior officer presented a report on human technological development. The humans had been making some advances in propulsion systems and weapons technology over the past decade. Nothing significant. Nothing threatening. Zorath dismissed the report with a wave of one of his 4 hands. The humans were children playing with toys. They would never be a threat to the Dominion. Zorath did not know about the facility beneath the Nevada desert. The complex had no official name in any government database. Those who worked there called it simply the Hole. It extended 2 miles underground, protected by layers of rock, metal, and energy shields that the Keth sensors could not penetrate. 3,000 people lived and worked in this underground city, and none of them had seen sunlight in years. Chief Engineer Sam Hartley stood on a platform overlooking the main construction bay. He was 45 years old with calloused hands and permanent dark circles under his eyes. He had given 15 years of his life to this project. He had missed his daughter's childhood, his wife's funeral, and countless other moments that normal people took for granted. But when he looked at what they had built, he knew it was worth it. The ship was 3 kilometers long. Its hull was made of an alloy that human scientists had developed by studying captured Keth technology and then improving upon it. The engines could propel the vessel faster than anything the Keth had ever built. The weapon systems were designed by humans who had spent decades analyzing every weakness in Keth shield technology. They called it the USS Vanguard. Dr. Claire Bennett joined Sam on the platform. She was the project's lead theoretical physicist. a woman of 50 with white hair and glasses that she constantly pushed up her nose. She had solved equations that her Keth counterparts had struggled with for centuries. The jump drive that would allow the Vanguard to cross sectors in hours instead of days was her design. "The final tests are complete," she said. "She is ready." Sam nodded slowly. 15 years of work. Thousands of people keeping the greatest secret in human history. Countless sacrifices and sleepless nights and moments of despair when it seemed like the project would never succeed. And now they were done. The coalition government had been planning this moment for a long time. They had selected a crew of 800 from the very best humanity had to offer. Every person had been chosen for their skills, their courage, and their willingness to die for the chance at freedom. Admiral Ben Taylor would command the vessel. He was 60 years old, a veteran of the failed Mars uprising 2 decades earlier. He had watched friends die under Keth weapons fire. He had been forced to surrender and spend 3 years in a Keth prison camp. The experience had not broken him. It had only made his hatred burn colder and more patient. The Admiral arrived at the facility 3 days before the scheduled launch. He walked through the corridors of the Vanguard for the first time, running his hands along the walls, feeling the power that hummed through the ship's systems. This was humanity's answer to 300 years of Keth dominion. This was the weapon that would change everything. In the command center of Earth 7. Captain Jack Morrison received an encrypted transmission on a channel he had been told to monitor for the past 20 years. He read the message 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. Then he looked at his daughter, Kate. "It is time," he said. Kate did not ask what he meant. She had been waiting for this moment her entire life, even though she had not known exactly what form it would take. She simply nodded and began preparing the ship for whatever was about to happen. On Vithron, High Commander Zorath finished his evening meal and retired to his private chambers. He slept peacefully that night, untroubled by concerns about the primitive species on that distant blue planet. He would not sleep peacefully for much longer. The desert floor split open at exactly midnight. Massive doors that had been hidden beneath sand and rock for 15 years slid apart, revealing a shaft of light that reached toward the stars. Dr. Claire Bennett stood on the observation deck of the underground facility, watching through reinforced glass as the Vanguard began to rise. The ship moved slowly at first, its engines barely whispering as it cleared the underground hangar. Then it accelerated, climbing into the night sky like a great metal bird, finally freed from its cage. Claire had spent half her life working on this moment. She had solved problems that other scientists said were impossible. She had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge further than anyone had dared to dream. And now she watched her creation fly. Admiral Ben Taylor stood on the bridge of the Vanguard as the ship broke through Earth's atmosphere. Around him, his crew of 800 worked at their stations with calm efficiency. These were the best people humanity had produced. Pilots, engineers, weapons specialists, tactical officers, and medical staff who had trained in secret for years. They all knew what was at stake. They all understood that there would be no second chances. Lieutenant Commander Nick Santa sat at the weapons console. He was 35 years old with dark hair and steady hands. He had designed most of the Vanguard's offensive systems himself, including the quantum lance batteries that could punch through Keth shields like they were made of paper. Nick had never fired a weapon at a living target before. He had only run simulations. But he was ready. Lieutenant Amy Chung handled navigation and helm control from the pilot's station. She was 29, small in stature, but with reflexes that bordered on supernatural. Tests had shown that her reaction time was faster than any other human pilot ever recorded. She could process spatial information and make split-second decisions that other pilots could not match. When the Admiral had offered her this position, she had accepted without hesitation. the Keth detected the launch within 4 minutes. Their sensor network around Earth was extensive, designed to catch any unauthorized human ship attempting to leave the system. A patrol squadron of 12 Keth vessels moved to intercept what they assumed was a primitive human craft trying to flee. Commander Prithis led the patrol squadron. He was a young Keth officer eager to prove himself, and catching a fleeing human ship would look good on his service record. He ordered his vessels into an interception formation and opened a communication channel to the unknown ship. Human vessel, you are in violation of Dominion law. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. If you do not comply, you will be destroyed. Admiral Taylor listened to the message and smiled slightly. It was the same arrogant tone the Keth always used when speaking to humans. They expected obedience because they had never encountered resistance. That was about to change. Lieutenant Commander Santos, the Admiral said calmly, target the lead vessel and fire when ready. Nick's fingers moved across his console. The Vanguard's quantum lance batteries charged for exactly 1.3 seconds. Then they fired. Commander Prithis never understood what happened. His ship's shields, which were supposed to be impenetrable to human weapons, simply vanished. The hull behind them tore apart like wet paper. The explosion was so fast that the crew did not even have time to feel pain. One moment there were 12 Keth vessels in formation. The next moment there were 11. Prithis' second-in-command took over and ordered the remaining ships to attack. All 11 vessels opened fire simultaneously, pouring weapons energy at the Vanguard in a display of firepower that would have reduced any human ship to atoms. The Vanguard shields absorbed every shot without flickering. Lieutenant Commander Santos fired again, and again, and again. Each shot destroyed a Keth vessel instantly. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 4 minutes. When it was over, 12 Keth warships had been reduced to floating debris, and the Vanguard had not suffered a single point of damage. On the bridge, there was silence for a long moment. The crew understood what they had just done. They had destroyed Keth military vessels for the first time in history. They had proven that the Dominion could be hurt. There was no going back now. Admiral Taylor broke the silence. Send a coded message to Earth Command. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. Then set course for Keth territory. We have work to do. Amy Chun's hands moved across her console, and the Vanguard's jump drive activated. The ship vanished from Earth's solar system in a flash of light, traveling faster than any Keth vessel could follow. Across the galaxy, Keth command networks exploded with emergency signals. The destruction of the patrol squadron had been detected by a sensor station on the edge of the system. Officers scrambled to understand what had happened. The sensor data made no sense. Human weapons could not destroy Keth shields. Human ships could not survive Keth weapons fire. Yet 12 vessels were gone, and something had vanished into faster-than-light travel that the Keth could not track. High Commander Zorth was awakened in his private chambers on Vithron. He listened to the report with growing disbelief. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. He ordered the Third Fleet to be mobilized immediately. 400 warships under the command of Fleet Master Corvin would be dispatched to find and destroy this human vessel. Then Earth would be punished for its defiance. Every human on the planet would be killed as a lesson to other subject species. Fleet Master Corvin received his orders with grim satisfaction. He was an experienced commander who had crushed rebellions on 7 different worlds. He would find this human ship, destroy it, and prove that the Dominion remained supreme. On Earth, Captain Jack Morrison received a second encrypted message. This one contained only 2 words: "We fly." He read the message to his daughter Kate, and for the first time in 40 years, he allowed himself to hope that the coalition government began preparing for war. They knew the Keth would respond with overwhelming force. They knew that billions of lives hung in the balance. But they also knew that humanity finally had a chance. One ship, one crew, one opportunity to change everything. Dr. Claire Bennett remained at the underground facility, monitoring the Vanguard systems remotely. Chief Engineer Sam Hartley joined her in the control room, and together they watched the telemetry data streaming back from across the stars. Their creation was performing exactly as designed. Perhaps even better. The Vanguard jumped through Keth territory like a ghost, moving faster than the Dominion's tracking systems could follow. Admiral Taylor chose his first target carefully. The shipyard at Selenith Prime was the largest military production facility in the Outer Territories. Destroying it would send a message that nowhere was safe. The hunt had begun. But the Keth were not the hunters. The Selenith Prime shipyard hung in orbit above a gray moon, a massive structure of metal and energy that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. 60 Keth warships patrolled the space around it, protecting the facility that produced 1/4 of the Dominion's military vessels. Workers and soldiers moved through its corridors, building the instruments of conquest that had kept the galaxy in chains for 3 centuries. Admiral Ben Taylor studied the tactical display on the Vanguard's bridge. The shipyard was heavily defended, but he had seen the performance of his ship against the patrol squadron. He had confidence in his crew and in the weapons they carried. More importantly, he understood the psychological impact that destroying this facility would have on the Keth. "Take us in," he ordered. "All weapons ready." Lieutenant Amy Chen guided the Vanguard out of its concealed position behind a nearby asteroid. The ship moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, its engines pushing it forward at speeds that made the Keth patrol vessels look like they were standing still. The Keth detected the Vanguard 20 seconds before it opened fire. Alarms screamed across the shipyard as officers scrambled to their battle stations. The patrol commander ordered all 60 vessels to intercept the unknown contact. He assumed it was some kind of sneak attack by a rival Keth faction. He could not imagine that a human ship would dare to strike at the heart of Dominion territory. Lieutenant Commander Nick Santos fired the first volley. The quantum lance battery sent beams of focused energy slicing through space, and 3 Keth vessels exploded before they could raise their shields. The remaining ships returned fire, but their weapons splashed harmlessly against the Vanguard's defenses. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Nick fired continuously, his fingers dancing across the weapons console as he selected targets and calculated firing solutions. Amy piloted the Vanguard through the chaos of the engagement, dodging debris and positioning the ship for optimal firing angles. The bridge crew worked together like a single organism, each person knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. When the last patrol vessel was destroyed, the Vanguard turned its weapons on the shipyard itself. The quantum lances tore through the facility's armor, plating like it was made of cloth. Explosions rippled across the structure as reactors overloaded and fuel stores ignited. Within 3 minutes, the largest military shipyard in the Outer Territories was nothing but expanding clouds of debris. Admiral Taylor watched the destruction with a grim expression. He felt no joy in killing. He understood that thousands of Keth workers had just died, many of whom were simply doing their jobs. But he also understood that the Dominion had killed millions of humans over the past 40 years. Miners who died in accidents because the Keth did not care about safety. Protesters who were executed for speaking against their rulers. Children who grew up knowing they would never be free. This was justice, even if it was terrible. On Vithron, High Commander Zorath received news of the shipyard's destruction while meeting with his senior advisors. The report was delivered by a trembling junior officer who clearly expected to be executed for bringing such information. Zorath listened in silence, his 4 hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly that the stone cracked beneath his fingers. 400 years of life. 300 years of unchallenged dominion. And now a single human vessel was tearing through his empire like a blade through soft flesh. It was impossible. It should have been impossible. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Fleet Master Corvin received new orders. Find the human ship immediately. Destroy it at any cost. Corvin acknowledged the command and pushed his 400 vessels to maximum speed. He tracked the Vanguard's last known position and began searching the surrounding sectors. Back on Earth, the coalition government struggled to contain the situation. The Keth ambassador had demanded an explanation for the attack on the patrol squadron. When the news of Selenoth Prime's destruction arrived, the ambassador transmitted a message to Vthrone requesting permission to execute immediate reprisals against Earth's population. President Mary Sullivan was a woman of 63 who would spend her entire political career pretending to cooperate with the Keth while secretly supporting the resistance. Now she stood before a crisis that would determine humanity's future. She ordered all human military forces to prepare for defensive action. It was a gesture that would have been meaningless a week ago. Now it was a statement of defiance. Captain Jack Morrison received his orders aboard Earth 7. He and his crew were to join the orbital defense grid and prepare for Keth retaliation. Kate Morrison stood beside her father on the bridge, watching the tactical display as human ships moved into position around their homeworld. "Do you think the Vanguard can really do this?" she asked quietly. "One ship against the entire Dominion?" Jack looked at his daughter with tired eyes. "I do not know," he admitted. "But I know that we finally have a chance. That is more than we have had in 40 years. The Keth ambassador fled Earth the next day, his shuttle racing toward the nearest Keth-controlled system. He carried a message for High Commander Zorth. The humans were in rebellion. The entire species had apparently been planning this betrayal for decades. They had developed weapons that could destroy Keth vessels with ease. The Dominion faced a threat unlike anything it had encountered before. Zorth received the message and made a decision. Earth would be destroyed. Not conquered, not punished, but completely and utterly annihilated. He would assemble every available warship and burn the human homeworld to ash. Then he would hunt down every human in the galaxy and ensure that the species was erased from existence. But first, he needed to deal with the Vanguard. Fleet Master Corvin finally located the human ship in an asteroid field at the edge of the Vthran Gap. The Vanguard had stopped to make repairs and resupply from hidden caches that the Coalition had positioned years earlier. Corvin smiled when he saw his target on the sensor display. The human ship was impressive, but it was alone. He had 400 vessels. There was no possible way for a single ship to survive those odds. He ordered his fleet into an encirclement formation. The Vanguard would not escape this time. The hunt was over. Admiral Taylor stood on his bridge and watched the Keth fleet surround his ship. He counted the vessels carefully. 400 warships, each one crewed by beings who wanted him and his crew dead. The odds were not good by any conventional measure. But the Vanguard was not a conventional ship. "All hands to battle stations," the Admiral announced calmly. "This is what we train for. This is why we are here. Let us show them what humanity can do." The crew responded with silent determination. Nick Santos powered up the weapon systems. Amy Chung gripped her controls and prepared to fly. Every person on the ship understood that the next few hours would determine the future of their species. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. Fleet Master Corvin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human vessel on his tactical display. The Vanguard was surrounded. 400 Keth warships formed a sphere around it, their weapons charged and ready. There was nowhere for the humans to run, nowhere to hide. This hunt was over. Corvin opened a communication channel to the human ship. "Attention, human vessel. You are surrounded by the full might of the Third Fleet. Your destruction of our shipyard and patrol forces has been noted. You have two choices. Surrender immediately, and your crew will be given quick deaths. Resist, and you will be destroyed slowly while we force you to watch your homeworld burn. You have 60 seconds to respond." Admiral Ben Taylor listened to the message and felt nothing but calm determination. He had known this moment would come. He had prepared for it. His crew had trained for years to face exactly this situation. The Keth believed that numbers would decide this battle. They were wrong. "No response," the Admiral said. "Lieutenant Chen, execute attack pattern Omega. Lieutenant Commander Santos, fire at will." Amy Chun's hands moved across her controls, and the Vanguard surged forward with sudden violent acceleration. The ship dove straight at the nearest cluster of Keth vessels, moving faster than any ship its size should have been able to move. The Keth commanders scrambled to adjust their formations, but Amy was already past them before they could react. Nick Santos opened fire. The quantum lances struck 6 Keth vessels simultaneously, punching through their shields and hulls in less than a second. Explosions bloomed in the darkness of space as the human ship carved its way through the first line of the encirclement. Corvin watched in shock as the Vanguard tore through his formation. His ships fired everything they had, but the human vessel's shields absorbed the attacks without wavering. He had never seen anything like it. The humans should have been destroyed in the first volley. Instead, they were the ones doing the destroying. The battle became a storm of fire and metal. Amy piloted the Vanguard with supernatural precision, weaving between enemy vessels, using their own formations against them. She forced the Keth ships to hold their fire to avoid hitting each other, and in those moments of hesitation, Nick struck. Again and again and again. 1 hour into the battle, 100 Keth vessels had been destroyed. Corvin ordered his remaining ships to spread out, to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. But the Vanguard was too fast, too agile, too well-armed. Every tactic the fleet master tried was countered by the human crew. Deep in the Vanguard's engineering section, Chief Engineer Sam Hartley monitored the ship's systems with growing concern. The weapons were performing perfectly, but the constant maneuvering was putting strain on the engines. He made adjustments on the fly, rerouting power and reinforcing critical systems. His team of engineers worked beside him, keeping the ship alive through pure determination and skill. Dr. Claire Bennett had joined Hartley in engineering, monitoring the jump drive and the experimental shield generators. She had designed these systems to be pushed to their limits, but she had never imagined they would be tested quite like this. She made calculations in her head, adjusting parameters to squeeze every possible bit of performance from her creations. 2 hours into the battle, 200 Keth vessels remained. Fleet Master Corvin finally understood that he was going to lose. This single human ship had already destroyed half his fleet, and it showed no signs of slowing down. His tactical officers were dead. His flagship had taken damage from debris impacts. His crew was terrified, but Corvin was a proud Keth warrior. He refused to retreat. He ordered his remaining ships to make one final coordinated attack, throwing everything they had at the Vanguard in a desperate attempt to overwhelm its shields. Admiral Taylor saw the attack coming. He ordered Amy to bring the ship to a full stop and brace for impact. Nick redirected all available power to the shields and weapons. The crew held their breath as 200 Keth vessels opened fire simultaneously. The Vanguard shuddered under the assault. Warning lights flickered across the bridge. The shields held, but barely. Then Nick returned fire. The quantum lances had been charging during those few seconds of defensive focus. When they fired, they unleashed more concentrated energy than ever before. 30 Keth vessels exploded in the first volley. Then 40 more. The Vanguard began moving again, Amy guiding it through the chaos while Nick continued his devastating work. The final phase of the battle lasted 30 minutes. Corvin's flagship was the last vessel to fall. The Fleetmaster stood on his bridge until the end, watching the human ship approach with weapons charged. In his final moments, he transmitted a message to Vithron. The humans have built something we cannot defeat. The Dominion must prepare for war unlike any we have known. Then his ship exploded, and the Third Fleet ceased to exist. On the bridge of the Vanguard, there was silence. The crew stared at the debris field that had been 400 Keth warships. They had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. Admiral Taylor allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction before turning to his officers. Damage report. Sam Hartley's voice came through the communication system. Minor hull damage to the port side. One shield generator needs repairs. Engines are stressed, but functional. We can continue. The Admiral nodded. Good work, everyone. We are not done yet. Set course for the Kethcore systems. High Commander Zorth needs to understand that his empire is over. On Vithron, Zorth received Corvin's final message. He watched the recording of the battle 3 times, trying to understand how a single human vessel had destroyed 400 of his ships. The answer was simple but terrible. The humans had built something better. They had surpassed Keth technology. The Dominion's military superiority, the foundation of 3 centuries of rule, was a lie. Zorth began preparing his defenses. Every warship in the Empire was recalled to protect the homeworld. Over 2,000 vessels would gather above Vithron. It would be the largest fleet ever assembled in Keth history. On Earth, President Mary Sullivan addressed the global population. She announced that the human warship Vanguard had destroyed a Keth fleet and was continuing its mission to end the Dominion's oppression. Humanity was no longer a subject species. The chains that had bound them for 40 years were breaking. People took to the streets in celebration. Captain Jack Morrison watched the news feeds with tears in his eyes. His daughter Kate stood beside him, hardly able to believe what she was seeing. The dream that had seemed impossible was becoming real. The Vanguard jumped toward Vithron. The final battle was coming. The Vanguard emerged from its jump at the edge of the Vithron system. Admiral Ben Taylor stood on his bridge and looked at the tactical display. 2,047 Keth warships were assembled in orbit around the Dominion's capital world. It was the largest fleet in the history of the galaxy. Every vessel the Keth Empire had left was gathered here for one final stand. The Admiral turned to his crew. These 800 men and women had followed him across the stars, fighting battles that should have been impossible to win. They were tired. They were pushed to their limits. But they were not finished. "This is it," Taylor said. "The heart of the Dominion. The seat of their power. For 300 years, the Keth have ruled this galaxy through fear and force. Today, that ends. Today, we show every enslaved species in every conquered system that the Dominion can fall. Today, we fight for humanity. We fight for freedom. We fight for everyone who has ever lived under the shadow of Keth oppression." The crew responded with silent determination. Nick Santos powered up the weapon systems one more time. Amy Chun gripped her controls and prepared for the most difficult flight of her life. In engineering, Sam Hartley and Dr. Claire Bennett made final adjustments to the ship's systems. Everyone knew what was at stake. Everyone was ready. High Commander Zorth watched the human vessel approach on his command display. He had assembled every ship in his empire, called in every reserve fleet, stripped defenses from 100 systems. This was the full might of the Keth Dominion, concentrated in one place for one purpose. The human ship would be destroyed here. It had to be. Zorth opened a communication channel to the Vanguard. He expected the humans to surrender when they saw the force array against them. No sane species would challenge such overwhelming numbers. Admiral Taylor's response surprised him. "High Commander, I am here to offer you terms. The Keth Empire will release all subject species from servitude. You will withdraw from all conquered systems. Earth will be recognized as a free world. In exchange, your people will be allowed to live in peace. You have 1 hour to accept these terms." Zorath felt rage boiling through his ancient veins. A single human ship was offering him terms of surrender. It was beyond insult. It was madness. "You are one ship," Zorath replied. "I have over 2,000. Your species will be erased from existence. Every human will die. Your world will burn. This is your only legacy. A foolish gesture that cost your species its future." Admiral Taylor nodded slowly. He had expected this answer. "Then we have nothing more to discuss. All hands, battle stations. Lieutenant Chun, take us in." The Battle of Vithran began with the Vanguard charging directly at the center of the Keth formation. 2,000 ships opened fire simultaneously, creating a storm of weapons energy that lit up the darkness of space. The Vanguard's shields flared under the assault, absorbing punishment that would have destroyed 100 ordinary vessels. Amy Chun flew like she had never flown before. She pushed the ship through gaps in the enemy formation that seemed impossibly small, using the massive Keth vessels against themselves. The Keth commanders hesitated to fire when their own ships were in the line of attack, and in those moments of hesitation, Nick Santa struck. The quantum lances fired continuously. One Keth ship after another exploded as Nick targeted weak points in their formations. The Vanguard cut a path through the fleet, leaving destruction in its wake, but the Keth had learned from the previous battle. They adapted their tactics, spreading out and attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. The Vanguard began taking hits. Small impacts at first, then larger ones. Warning lights appeared across the bridge as systems took damage. In engineering, Sam Hartley worked frantically to keep the ship functional. Power conduits overloaded and had to be rerouted. Hull breaches were sealed with emergency patches. Injured crew members were carried to the medical bay while their colleagues continued fighting. Dr. Claire Bennett monitored the shield generators as they strained under the constant assault. "How long can we maintain this?" Sam asked. Claire checked her calculations. "The shields will hold for at least 4 more hours at current stress levels. But if they concentrate their fire effectively, that could drop significantly." The battle raged for 2 hours. The Vanguard destroyed over 500 Keth vessels, but the remaining fleet continued its relentless attack. Admiral Taylor felt the strain in his bones. He was 60 years old, and he had been fighting without rest for weeks. But he refused to show weakness. His crew needed him to be strong. Amy Chun executed a maneuver that brought the Vanguard behind a cluster of Keth battleships. Nick destroyed all 6 before they could turn to face the threat. But one lucky shot struck the Vanguard's engine section, and the ship shuddered violently. "Engine damage," Sam reported from engineering. "We have lost 15% thrust capacity." The Admiral nodded. "Compensate as best you can. We are not stopping." Hour 3 brought more destruction on both sides. The Keth fleet had been reduced to just over 1,000 ships, but they were fighting with desperate fury. High Commander Zorath commanded from his flagship, directing his forces with centuries of tactical experience. He was beginning to believe that even this human ship could be worn down eventually. But Admiral Taylor had one more surprise. "Lieutenant Commander Santos, target the flagship. All weapons." Nick locked onto Zorath's command vessel and fired every weapon the Vanguard possessed simultaneously. The concentrated blast punched through the flagship's shields and struck its reactor core. The explosion was massive, consuming the command vessel and 3 ships. Nearby, Zoreth died in an instant of fire and pain. The effect on the Keth fleet was immediate. With their supreme commander dead, confusion spread through their ranks. Some ships continued fighting. Others began to retreat. The coordinated defense collapsed into chaos. Admiral Taylor pressed the advantage. The vanguard swept through the disorganized fleet, destroying vessel after vessel. By the end of the 6th hour, fewer than 200 Keth ships remained. They were scattered, damaged, and demoralized. The surviving Keth commanders transmitted their surrender. The Battle of Vithron was over. The Dominion had fallen. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed. Subject species across 100 systems rose up against their Keth overseers. Without military support, the local Keth administrators fled or surrendered. The empire that had ruled for 3 centuries crumbled like ancient stone. Humanity emerged not as conquerors, but as liberators. Admiral Taylor transmitted a message to every inhabited system, offering friendship and alliance to any species that sought freedom. The response was overwhelming. Delegations arrived at Earth from dozens of worlds, eager to establish relations with the species that had broken the Dominion's chains. The Vanguard was placed in permanent orbit above Earth as a monument. Its crew was honored as heroes. Admiral Taylor retired to a quiet farm in Montana, though he was never truly left alone. Visitors came from around the world and beyond, wanting to meet the man who had commanded humanity's liberation. Captain Jack Morrison lived to see his grandchildren grow up free. He told them stories about the old days, about watching alien ships block out the sun, about dreaming of a future that seemed impossible. His daughter Kate eventually took command of the second human dreadnought, the USS Horizon, and led exploration missions to the far reaches of the galaxy. Sam Hartley and Claire Bennett continued their work, developing new technologies that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. The facility beneath the Nevada desert was transformed into a museum, and visitors came to see where the Vanguard had been built. Nick Santos trained a new generation of weapons officers, passing on the skills he had developed during those desperate battles. Amy Chun became a flight instructor, teaching young pilots to fly with the precision and courage that had saved humanity. President Mary Sullivan signed treaties with 17 species during her term, building an alliance of free worlds that would ensure peace and cooperation across the galaxy. The Keth survivors were allowed to live on their homeworld under supervision, a lesson in mercy that the Old Dominion would never have shown. The stars that had once belonged to tyrants now belonged to the free. Humanity had risen from subjugation to take its place among the great species of the galaxy, not through conquest, but through courage. Not through domination, but through determination. The Vanguard hung in orbit above Earth, a silent reminder of what humanity had achieved. Children pointed at it from their parents' shoulders, learning the story of how one ship and one crew had changed the fate of the galaxy. The Dominion had ruled the stars for 300 years, until humanity said no more.